And now, Deborah Kobylt Live.
Thank you very much. And thanks everybody for joining us today for Deborah Kobylt Live. Terrific guests that we have in studio. Dr. Joel Gould, who is a well-known dentist here in Los Angeles. And Dr. Gould has also just written a book called The Modern Epidemic. Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you.
Excited to have you. Talk to me about the modern pandemic. You actually, there's a variety of topics that you talk about, everything from vitamin D, which you're telling us is crucial, particularly during this time of COVID. You talk about anxiety. You talk about tribal life and how folks who came way before us knew how to, naturally use the earth, wind, fire, and water as healing mechanisms. And we've gotten so far away from that. So we're going to talk about all that stuff.
Great.
Let's first talk about vitamin D, because that's something that you talk about quite often in the book and when you and I were speaking on the phone, would you?
Sure, absolutely. Well, the first thing people need to understand is that humans evolved to be hunter-gatherers, but we live in the modern world. And what that means is that the offices we work in, the clothing that we wear, and our lifestyles literally form the bars of a gilded cage that we build for ourselves for comfort and convenience. But what we've done is we've literally separated ourselves from the elements of life that were instrumental in our evolution. And so without being in our natural habitat, we have to be very careful about what we tell our bodies. And one of the most important things that I discovered, which was a huge surprise, is that humans are technically solar-powered animals. And what that means is without sunlight, we really can't be healthy. Now, vitamin D is a very important hormone. It's not a vitamin at all. And there are many other chemicals that are made when we're out in the sun. So I want people to understand that even though you live in the modern world, we really want to reconnect to those tribal origins. And that's why I came up with the whole idea of tribal life. There's lots of doctors out there saying, take vitamins and live this certain lifestyle. I wanted to make the whole understanding of why people are not well these days make more sense. And that's literally being disconnected from our natural habitat. One of the primary things that we make from sunlight is vitamin D. Now, vitamin D is supposed to be made for humans in sunlight. People think it comes from milk, but it's artificially placed there and only a really small amount. And so this is a very massive issue. And what's really fascinating is that I didn't know about vitamin D until 5 years ago. I had never been tested for it. I had never really understood that it was even important, other than there was a little bit of my multivitamin or the RDA, recommended daily allowance. Now, the issue is that we didn't learn about this and your doctor doesn't know about this. So vitamin D is a hormone that regulates gene expression, your sleep cycle, and your gut microbiome. These are all extremely important things. And when it comes to your gut microbiome, this is where your immune system is centered. So vitamin D is a powerful hormone that regulates the immune system on so many different levels. And the reason that people haven't heard about this, it's not taught. There was a massive shift in how medicine was treating patients, and we have nature and nurture. So nature is the genes that you inherited. That's our current medical paradigm. It's called the allopathic medical paradigm, where doctors are treating the symptoms of your disease. You have a problem, they'll give you a pill to mask that.
Well, we talked about that, right? I mean, sometimes I'll go to the doctor and I'll say, but this is happening. They'll say, well, we'll fix it. I said, no. I want to know why it's happening. And a lot of times, you know what I get? I don't know. Let's just fix it. And I think, hey, wait a minute. I have to know so it doesn't continue. I'm not one to want to take a pill. My whole family knows that about me. And they're like, why? I said, this is the reason why. Because if we know what's going on, right?
It goes to root cause. And the real issue is that, so we've done the nature thing. The nurture is the environment. So what is the environment around us telling our bodies? And our bodies are sensors for the environment. Light comes into our eyes. Light that hits the skin around your eyes tells your brain all kinds of different things about the environment that you live in. So medical doctors, even if they're kind and caring people, if they don't have the whole picture, they did not learn about vitamin D, it's not taught. So an entire massive amount of information about our environment was omitted from all of medicine. Now, I wanted to show this. This is a book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. This was a book written 80 years ago by another Canadian dentist by the name of Weston Aaron Price. Now, this gentleman's information, he had very few things that he wanted to say, but he had gone out into the field to talk to different tribes all around the world. And he found that universally, there were two substances that all of these different Aboriginal peoples had in abundance that created their health, the health of their bodies, the health of their immune system, and even the growth of their jaw and their teeth. And those two things turned out to be vitamin D3 and vitamin K2. And these two substances are some of the most important chemicals that we can have in our body. And your doctor didn't learn about this. It's still not taught in any schools today. And, you know, going to school in Canada, this guy, he was alive just up the road from me 80 years ago, but I didn't learn about him. So we have this paradigm of big pharma, and they manipulate everything. They influence.
I was just going to say that, because that's how they're taught here, to work in unison with big pharma. Absolutely. You know, and it's yes.
The way that it's integrated into our medical paradigm is terrifying, because these powerful companies, they're manipulating how doctors see the world. And that's, you know, this happened to me. Part of my story is that I was one of those people who took those pharmaceutical medications for the majority of my life. For 34 years, I have autoimmune disease called Crohn's. And I followed my doctor's orders until 5 years ago, because I didn't know that there was any other solution. When I contacted my doctors and said, hey, I've got the root cause of Crohn's disease, they weren't that interested, because it's not something that they can get their minds around. And this is very tragic, because today this is playing out in the health of children. You know, anyone who's listening to this, if you have children, if they grind their teeth or they snore, this is a very serious issue. This is a neurological condition, and it's simply caused by too low level of vitamin D. And
hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Let me just stop you for a second.
You got it.
Vitamin D. What about people who are indoors a lot? What about people who live in really cold climates? How can they get it? Can they still go outside and absorb the same amount of vitamin D? That's question one. Question two, can you get the same amount in a gummy? I'm going to guess your answer is no way.
Well, no. So first of all, if you need to take a gummy, chew a gummy to get your vitamins, I'm okay with that.
Really? Okay.
Well, you know, I'm a dentist, so I'm working on my line of sugar-free gummies, which, you know, will be out, hopefully out there one of these days. But you have to understand that when you live in the Northern Hemisphere, through 4 or 5 months of the year, you cannot get your vitamin D naturally. But even if you could, people these days, they're staying indoors. They're afraid of the sun. They cover themselves with sunscreen as per their doctor's orders. And now everyone has a certain degree of sun phobia. And with the pandemic, this is the worst part, is that people have taken lockdown or staying at home to be staying indoors. And even here in Los Angeles, so many of my patients, as they started to come in for their regular checkups and cleanings this summer, they were all severely vitamin D deficient, because they were not getting the casual sun exposure of walking from your house to the office, going out for lunch. These things are completely different now. So people are all extremely vitamin D deficient to begin with. And that brings us to what we're seeing across the country, is that this pandemic is spiking in the Northern Hemisphere.
What do we do? That's very interesting. What do we do with the sunscreen though? Does that block the certain amount of D coming in, or does it just block the UV rays? What does it do?
So it'll block all UVB radiation. Now, you should always put sunscreen on your face. If you believe that you want to wear sunscreen, there's no good reason to expose your face to extra sun. But if you want to go out in the sun to intentionally get vitamin D, then you need to expose the majority of your body. You need to have a good surface area. This comes from the idea that humans evolved without clothing, hats, or sunscreen, and that just being outside as a hunter-gatherer, you would have a very high level of vitamin D by the end of the summer. So if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, you generally will have light skin. Think about people in Iceland. So that light skin will allow in so much more UVB radiation, you'll make more vitamin D. And that's why people with darker skin need to be in the sun much longer to make the same amount of vitamin D as someone else. And this actually brings us to some of the statistics. Why is it that people with darker skin are having more serious COVID events? And this is because those are the people who are lower in vitamin D. All things being equal, just simply having darker skin requires that you be in the sun longer to make vitamin D. So
interesting. Okay. See?
Yeah. And, there's lots of other factors with this, but
yeah, there are many factors that go into that, not just the vitamin D, but that's one big one.
It's a major one. Also, obesity. People, when they think of obesity, they usually blame the person. And I want people to understand is that if your doctor is giving you the wrong orders, if the diet that your doctor is telling you to eat isn't what's right for your body, we can't blame people for not having the right weight. So many people, especially young women, torture themselves over their body size, and they are trying so hard to be fit and healthy, but we're being given the wrong instructions. Many young women are following vegetarian and vegan recommendations, thinking this is a better way to live, that it's healthier. And I'm terrified because the entire plant-based industry is a marketing tool to get us to stop eating the foods of our ancestors. And those,
right. And you're saying whole meats, whole foods, whole vegetables, things in whole form, right? Raw form.
Right. Not necessarily raw, but non-processed. So humans became the top of the food chain by eating meat. The healthiest food on this planet is red meat. And this is going sharply against what doctors are telling us. Now, I want to make this clear that so my patients are great. They're all trying to be healthy. And they all tell me I eat clean, I eat very little red meat, and I eat lean chicken and a little bit of fish. This is wrong. The healthiest food on the planet is red meat. The fattier the meat, the better. I prefer to have grass-fed organic meat, but we're getting the exact opposite information. Now, it doesn't matter what people think. People have been brainwashed against red meat. Everyone thinks it's toxic. It's not the red meat. It's the fries and the bun and all of the things that come with that red meat. So if you were to eat nothing but red meat, and that includes organ meats, you want to really nose to tail, because this is how we evolved. Red meat is one of the healthiest meats. And I don't even need one single scientific study to prove this. There are many. But you have to understand something, that most of the studies that we see are manipulated and created by the industries that will profit from the results. Plain as that.
Absolutely.
No, you remember a time, and it was in the late 70s, early 80s, where we were told that fat is bad. Don't eat eggs, don't eat butter, don't eat red meat. And I remember my mother came home one day and literally said, that's it, we're changing kids. We're not going to be having meat every night. And we ate meat every night.
Right. And then you know what? People started eating pasta. Boy, did they balloon up. You know what I mean? And by pasta, I'm talking about pasta that was in a box, as opposed to maybe making it on your own.
You know, when you cut out red meat from your diet, what do you replace it with? You know, you're replacing with these filler foods. Okay. Yeah. Now, when I say this, people listening may think, well, this guy's crazy. He's just a dentist. And, you know, my doctor wouldn't tell him this. Your doctor's been brainwashed. And when it comes down to is the actual composition of the meat itself. And the reason I say red meat is the healthiest is because it's basically cows are ruminants, and they will filter their food very well. Different types of food sources, chicken and pork, they're monogastric. Whatever they eat goes onto their tissue. You are what you eat eats.
You're absorbing that, right?
Yeah.
And turkey, I guess I imagine it's the same as a chicken, right?
Unless you can find a great organic free-range farm where they're not feeding these animals corn, grain, and soy. You want to avoid these foods. These are toxins to us.
Well, they're doing that now to cows too. I mean, I just saw a corn-fed cow. I'm like, a corn-fed cow? Oh my God, it's got to be grass-fed.
Well,
I mean,
that's, So the good news is,
get back to the way, you know what it is? Get back to the way it used to be done before these giant companies were formed. And what did they tell housewives at the time? It's like, we're here to make your life easier. Right. Not really. They're there to make a lot of money. So, that went out like 75 years ago is when that all started, right? Yeah. And then the modern housewife, you know, she didn't do much anymore from hand. She went out and bought it in a box. And we all know that that's when type 2 diabetes, you know, ballooned, as did obesity, right? And now we're living it now, right? And during COVID, you said yourself, obesity, one of the big problems. And basically it's because of the way we've been conditioned to eat. So you turned yourself around with your Crohn's disease. What was the number 1 and 2 thing that you stopped doing and that you started doing?
Sure. Well, the first thing is that when I discovered I had sleep apnea, that's when all this happened. And people think about sleep apnea, they think it's caused by obesity. That's not true at all. It causes obesity. This is a severe issue that's affecting a lot of the world right now. Many people are terrified to find out if they have apnea because they're thinking about the Darth Vader CPAP, and they know they don't want that in their lives. But I found out that I had sleep apnea, and right away I found out that it was linked to vitamin D deficiency. And when I raised my vitamin D level from a level of 18 nanograms per milliliter to 80, which is an evolutionary level that nobody around here or really in America will have unless they actively suntan or supplement, my Crohn's disease disappeared. And most of the things that were wrong, my back pain, my neck pain, my anxiety, depression, and the most profound change was Crohn's disease. I spent 34 years in bathrooms. When you see those commercials on TV about somebody and they show you the inside of a restroom door, that was my life. I moved to Los Angeles. Well, I lived here What I loved about this place is that there's a bathroom every quarter mile at the beach. So to me, this was the most comfortable place, and a lot of people are suffering from this right now. So within literally 3 months, I raised my vitamin D level and I made myself an oral device for sleep apnea because there is an alternative. Many people go to their sleep study and they come home with this CPAP machine that they didn't ask for and their spouse doesn't want, and they put it in their closet and they never get treated.
Absolutely. I know people who are, believe me, I know people who have done that. It's like, I'm not going to use this thing.
No.
You're absolutely right.
No, so I make an oral device called a mandibular advancement device. They're very effective, but more importantly, they're acceptable. You can travel with them. They're not embarrassing. They don't keep someone else up. So these devices, they can't fix everyone, but they're highly effective, but they're tricky. You need to go to a dentist who's specifically trained in this type of work. You don't want to order something online. This can cause permanent jaw changes. So as a dentist, this is part of what I do here. And, over the last 5 years, I've been treating a lot of sleep apnea, and I have a different program. You can see behind me, it says, Modern Sleep Solutions, Sleep Restoration. I want to restore people's sleep. I don't want to say, here's your CPAP, you're stuck with this the rest of your life. Sleep apnea is a preventable, reversible syndrome that comes along with so many other illness factors. The reason that we focus on sleep is because you can hear snoring and you can feel tired. Your blood pressure is affected. Yeah,
it's
all
awful.
These other, it's terrible. So, and then keep in mind that you're supposed to regenerate every night when you go to sleep. Now, what people don't know about sleep apnea is that it's literally as if someone's putting a pillow over your face over and over all night long. And what happens is when your oxygen falls, your brain gets a signal that you are dying, and then you release adrenaline and cortisol.
So you wake up.
You wake up, but it's the fight or flight reaction. And this is the reaction you're supposed to be having once in a rare while when you encounter a predator out in the wild. People are lying in their bed safely at night, getting choked and going through that fight or flight over and over. So in the time that you should be sleeping, resting, regenerating, you're literally fighting a battle for your life. So when people wake up and they feel unrefreshed, this should be number one on the radar. I have petite, thin, fit young women. I have elite athletes. I have people of every kind. This is not a disease caused by old age, obesity. This is not your fault. And I want people to know the sooner you address this syndrome, the better off you're going to be. Now, it just so happens, so happens to go along with the idea that a study came out today, in Forbes magazine, anyone can look at this, that 8 out of 10 people in Italy who had a bad outcome with the coronavirus were extremely vitamin D deficient. So to me, this makes sense because it's not just the coronavirus. Vitamin D is not the cure to the coronavirus. Vitamin D regulates the immune system itself and your body's ability to fight not just the coronavirus, every virus, and the secondary bacterial infections. Because in the old days, before we had antibiotics, the cure to a bacterial lung infection like tuberculosis was to go to a sanatorium and lie in the sun. That was the medical treatment prior to 1940.
Once again, what they used to do before big business took all this over. Briefly, if you don't mind, the gut and microbiome. I know that we could talk about that forever, but there's lots of talk about that. Briefly, tell me, what are they talking about? What do we need to do to get it right?
Sure. So it turns out that our DNA isn't that important. It's our microbes. The DNA of our microbes outnumbers ours 100 to 1. And what that means in English is that these microbes, they produce all kinds of chemicals that we rely on for our health. 90% of your serotonin, your dopamine, your neurotransmitters are made in the gut. Now, your gut microbiome weighs about the same as your brain, and I think it's almost as important. And there's something called the gut-brain axis, where your brain communicates with the enteric nervous system, which is your gut's brain. And this communication is something that sends a signal to you to tell you what to eat. It's telling you what your microbes want. So we're in a symbiotic relationship with these microbes, and we don't just have them in our gut. We have them in our mouths, in our nose, on our skin, and in our lungs. And these microbiomes are critically important because these bacteria make chemicals that protect us. People who don't know how antibiotics were basically discovered, they were a bacterial byproduct that was found by accident. So microbes make antibiotics. Microbes make anti-inflammatory cytokines. And these are the things that are overwhelming people with the coronavirus and the immune system.
What does that mean? Like, you got to break it down to basic, like, in other words, do this and don't do that. So what are you saying? So basically, when your gut microbiome is healthy, it's a diverse microbiome of all the different bacteria that you need. What regulates the microbiome is vitamin D and your diet and your activity, the environment. So if you want to be healthy, number one, you must maintain a vitamin D level well up over 50. And that's a level that very few people have. And the reason is that
your gut microbiome line, your gut lining is regulated by vitamin D. Vitamin D will regulate which species of bacteria that it wants to have there. And you need to think of it this way. In the old days when it was winter and your vitamin D level would drop, a totally different amount of microbes or different kind of microbes would come in, and they would send a signal to the brain to eat as much as you could, and they would basically help you store your fat. Yeah.
How much vitamin D should we be getting a day?
Well, so it's technically a complex issue, but a good rule of thumb is 1,000 international units per 25 pounds. Okay.
So, oh wow, so that's a lot. So if you're a 150-pound person, how much should you be either ingesting? Let's talk about ingesting, because I don't know how to even quantify that if you're outdoors. I don't even know how to do that.
Right. So there are apps to help regulate your vitamin D. But, you know, at this point in time, anyone listening to this who lives in a line north of Atlanta to Los Angeles, there is no vitamin D available. We're too deep in winter. You cannot make vitamin D. The sun is not high enough in the sky to actually produce vitamin D on your skin. So everyone should be supplementing. Now,
so how much of a supplement? Like how you said every 25 pounds. Again, let's say you're 50 pounds, a 150-pound person. How much should you be
200-pound man, 8,000 IU. 150-pound woman, yeah, 5,000 IU. And you have to understand that that's just your daily dose. Now, if you are very deficient, if you've been told by your doctor that you're low and you've never taken more than 1,000 IU or something like that, or a multivitamin, you need to raise your level quickly, and you want to do a loading dose. So I recommend a loading dose of 20,000 international units of vitamin D. Sounds massive. It's 0.5 milligrams, and that's the amount that a human wearing a bathing suit, lying outside for 20 minutes in the sun could make. So that's still an evolutionary amount. And that's an amount you want to do minimum 2 weeks, 4 weeks, but you don't want to take vitamin D alone. You always want to take it with two other things. You want to take it with vitamin K2 and magnesium. I call this the terrific trio because the elimination of these three mineral and vitamins from our food chain is the result of probably 80% of the chronic illness that we see. Just replacing those three things is critical. And the reason that you want these things together is that vitamin D regulates your intake of calcium. Vitamin K2 manages the calcium. So even if you take calcium and vitamin D, that calcium will now build up in your arteries or in your skin. In your skin, it causes wrinkles, and in your arteries, it causes what doctors think of as heart disease. But this is just calcium that's not getting into the matrix of your bones. And in the old days, when we were hunter-gatherers, during the summer, we'd be eating a lot of green grass, getting a lot of vitamin K2, and the animals that eat green grass, and we'd be getting a lot of vitamin D. In the winter, we'd be using up our vitamin D, and we'd be using up the calcium that we had stored. So
the vitamin D, the vitamin K2, and the magnesium, very briefly, why are we incorporating that too?
Right. So magnesium is a critical element that activates your body's electricity system. Everyone's heard of ATP in high school, adenosine triphosphate. I call it human electricity. And every molecule of ATP is a little rechargeable battery pack that requires magnesium to turn it on. So if you don't have enough magnesium, you're not going to make enough energy.
Gosh, we could talk to you forever. I'm going to actually have to let you go, but I have one more question before I do. You're a dentist. We didn't talk about dental health very quickly. How important is that? Because they say, oh my gosh, if you don't take care of your teeth, you're going to build plaque around the heart. What's the truth? I mean, give me the quick.
Sure. The misinformation is if you have bacteria in your mouth, it's going to drain and leak into your body and infect other places. That's nonsense. Why the health of the mouth is obvious is that when the vitamin D level goes down, the gut microbiome shifts, but so does the oral microbiome, and you no longer have the healthy bacteria in your mouth that protect you. Hunter-gatherers did not brush their teeth. So the link between poor health, diabetes, heart disease, and a poor oral environment is vitamin D. When the D level goes down, you cannot maintain health. And we'll see decay and gum disease. These are primary vitamin D deficiencies. They're not caused by sugar. They're literally caused by a lack of a hormone in your body that would regulate all of the microbes in your body. That's the link.
Very interesting. Dr. Joel Gould, you practice here in Los Angeles. Your book, how can people get it? Because I know it's not yet out. So how can people find this? It's called The Modern Epidemic. By the way, it's very well done. I love all the little illustrations in there. They sort of make it fun to read and understand and comprehend what you're talking about, because there's a lot of information in there. It's good stuff, people. So I do want people to read this. But how can they find it until it's out on where they can get it on, before they can get it on Amazon?
Sure. So it's available. My website is called modernhuntergatherers.com. And on that website, if you scroll to the end, you'll be able to sign up for my book. I'm not going to send you any stuff. I'm not going to bother you with emails. But when you put your email in, you'll get a PDF immediately. It'll download, and you can share that with other people. And please,
that's
share
great.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's an easy read. I loved it, and it was informative in the way you have it grouped up. But hopefully also it'll be out in book form so we can flip through it. I love to, leave something like that in my kitchen and just, thumb through it as I'm going through, or at night when I want to read more about this, because it's everything. It's why we're unhealthy. And the number one takeaway, vitamin D, people. So please look up Dr. Joel Gould, The Modern Epidemic. Go to his website, Facebook, Instagram. It's all there. And if you need to have your teeth looked at, please look him up in Los Angeles, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Any final words?
No, just everyone just know that if you're taking a multivitamin, it does not have enough vitamin D. This is something people need to get to know. People are thinking about their cholesterol levels. I don't care about cholesterol levels. I care about vitamin D levels. It's time for people to start to know what their levels are and manage them. This is very important.
Thank you very, very much, Doctor. Appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today with the doctor on Deborah Kobylt Live. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube, also on the UBN Go page. We put all of our promos over on Instagram. And then for those who listen to their podcasts, you can find us everywhere. We're now on Amazon, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, just anywhere that you get your podcasts, you'll find us. Just look up Deborah Kobylt Live. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.